Topic 1C, the difference between an observation and an inference. You should take notes during this podcast, pause it as necessary, and listen to it as many times as you need to, as you'll need them and these skills to complete many future graded assignments. By the end of this podcast, you should be able to explain the difference between an observation and an inference and make observations of a visual primary source and draw inferences from those observations. Historians are much like doctors. After examining clues, we try to create a story from them. Whereas doctors examine various symptoms made by the human body, historians examine a variety of artifacts that people living in the past made. As we learned in podcast 1, these artifacts are called primary sources and might include visual materials like paintings and photographs, physical objects like gravestones and monuments, and textual documents like speeches, diaries, and newspaper articles. Just as a doctor uses her sense of sight to look into her ears and hearing to listen to the sound of your lungs, so too does a historian make observations of the past using these senses. Let's practice using our powers of observation now. Before examining the visual source, set up your notebook. Make 2 columns by drawing a line down the center of the page. Next, draw a series of horizontal lines across the page to create rows. At the top of the first column, write the word observations, and to its right, inferences. Pause this video if you need more time to do this. Now you're ready to make observations of this painting. Remember, only write things you can see in the left column. Do not write what they might mean. For example, a very basic observation about this painting is that it features a woman prominently in the foreground. Try to observe more complex details and record each one in a separate row in the left column of your notebook. Pause the video now and take as long as you need to make as many observations as you can. How'd you do? Take a moment to compare your own observations of this painting to mine by pausing the podcast again now. Just as a doctor's observations are useless unless she can make a diagnosis from them, so too are historians' observations meaningless without the inferences we draw from them. An inference is a conclusion based on evidence and reasoning. Evidence in the doctor's case is based on those observations. For instance, a doctor might listen to your lungs and hear congestion, look down your throat and see redness, and touch your neck and feel swollen glands. Yet, without reasoning, there are several inferences she could draw from those symptoms or evidence. Do you have a cold or bronchitis? The doctor might ask you questions to help her reason or figure out whether the inference that she should draw is the common cold or bronchitis. In the same way, historians analyze observations or evidence that we compile in order to make inferences about the past. What conclusions can we draw, for example, about this portrait of a woman with red hair, dressed in rich fabrics encrusted in pearls, with her hand on top of a globe, and battleships warring in the seas outside her window? Pause the video once more to take a moment to use your powers of analysis and reasoning to record some inferences about the observations that you drew now. Feel free to combine multiple pieces of evidence or observations to make a single inferences based on them. How'd you do? If you found inference making more difficult than observation making, don't worry. Drawing inferences is a more challenging mental task than making observations, and it's one we'll practice together in this course. Moreover, without some key background knowledge, like knowing that the style of dress is late 16th century and that Queen Elizabeth I of England had red hair, it might be difficult to reason your way to the conclusion I'm about to make. But if you did know that the woman is the English Queen Elizabeth I, you might have inferred that her hand on the globe symbolized her rising power in the world through her increasing command of the seas, as evidenced by the naval battle behind her. Perhaps the dozens of pearls, a jewel that emanates from the ocean, in the Queen's hair and dress also help you to arrive at that inference. With a little more background knowledge, you might have further correctly inferred that the fleet being defeated was, in fact, the Spanish Armada, and that this very work was commissioned to celebrate Protestant England's trouncing of Catholic Spain in 1588. In some future podcasts, we'll learn about the various colonies' different subjects of the English crown established across the Atlantic Ocean in the decades after this victory. As you embark upon your own journey in this course, you'll have more opportunities to practice the key skills of an historian: observation or evidence gathering, and inference making based on those observations. One without the other is much less powerful than both together. So as you begin to form paragraphs on quizzes in this course, remember to describe and then explain the meaning of what you see and read in order to master the historian's craft. For now, review the learning objectives for this podcast. Write each one out in a sentence or paragraph. If you find that you can't do so, go back to the beginning, listen and watch again, and pause as necessary to supplement the notes you've already taken until you can easily do so. Good luck!